Culture drives everything, and you're going to get your best employees and you're going to keep your best employees with a great culture. If you want to keep your A players, you really have to be in tune with what's going on in their world.
On the employer side, you really, really have to make sure that your culture speaks as loud as possible.
Yes.
It's so important to make sure that you're keeping everyone happy in your organization, because the people that are going to be doing the interviewing are the ones that are going to demonstrate and display your culture. So if you're able to share culture and core values, those are the companies where people are going to want to jump to. For those candidates that are employed, you have to be proactive to stand out amongst your peers so that you can continue to develop and build your career, build your resume. This is not a time to pull back. This is not a time to take it easy. You need to raise your hand. You need to be your own advocate. This is the time where you have to do extra. This is a time for you to build.
This is Sparta!
Welcome back to Spartan Leadership. I'm your host, Josh Kosnick. And man, I am excited to have my friend today with you. Anytime Tom and I get together, we have some deep, meaningful conversations, and you guys get a front row to that. So let me briefly introduce my friend Tom. So in today's conversation, we are reinforcing the importance of leadership and entrepreneurial mindset, because Tom is great at both, and he's built a beautiful and great company and career and life. But this is going to be through a new lens. I got executive recruiter, managing partner, and founder of the Carolan Group. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, you did.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Please join me in welcoming my friend Tom Caravela. Welcome, brother, to the show.
I am so excited. And you know what? You hit the nail on the head. This is going to be the other people are going to have the chance to listen into what we normally talk about, because this is what we do. We talk about life, and we talk about business and leadership and how to help others. So I love the chance to be able to do this for an audience. So bring it on, man. Bring it on.
Well, I'm excited for everyone to hear our conversations. And by the way, for those of you, thinking about friendships in your life, relationships in your life, like these are the type of conversations you should be having. These are the tables you should be sitting at with your friends. And if you're not, you probably should reassess your friend group. I'm just going to put that out there right now. So before we get into today's discussion, let's establish some credibility to make sure we have everyone's attention. Tom has spent the last 20 plus years establishing himself as a specialized search expert. I know that when he introduces himself, he says he works in a very niche market. So walk our listeners through your professional career and how you secured your position in this niche market.
Yeah. Well, it's an amazing story, and it's such a happenstance story. It was like one of these accidentally on purpose. I kind of wound up where I am, but I believe things happen for a reason. You know, Josh, I'm a very spiritual person, so very faithful person. So I feel like this is where God wants me to be. But going back, I started out my career literally selling HMO plans before anybody knew what an HMO was. So I was like a health insurance guy right out of college, which was interesting because like at that time, being a door-to-door health insurance rep selling HMOs was like one of the worst things you could possibly do. I mean, I just remember like in like my first meeting, I remember this little old lady, and she was like, "You mean I have to switch my doctor?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, but we have really good doctors on this list." So anyway, so I started my career in selling HMO plans, and then I got into pharmaceutical sales. I did that for many years. And then I just kind of accidentally on purpose wound up in the recruiting business. I was literally at the gym working out one day, struck up a conversation with a guy in the machine next to me. Turns out that he was starting a recruiting company with a bunch of guys. They were looking for somebody to help them with their sales and marketing. Fast forward, we start working together. This is like pre-Y2K. So it was like internet.com boom. It was a great time to get into like IT recruitment. So we crushed it. Things went really well. So I learned the recruiting business from the IT side. But then 9/11 happened and the whole world fell apart, obviously.
And you're in Jersey in the East Coast, so it's probably even more so than here in the Midwest.
Yeah, it was bad. As a matter of fact, on a personal level, so my cousin Craig worked at Cantor Fitzgerald. So 30 years old, was literally just starting out, tremendous career ahead of him. Never came home.
Man,
you know, I remember being at work that day and seeing what happened. We were all talking about it in the office, and I remember calling him, and the phone like picked up, but it had this really weird busy signal. It was like really, it like haunts me to this day. The sound of it was almost like a siren. I don't know what it was, but it just was so alarming. And then it turned out that we all wound up going home and we watched everything on the news. I wound up going to his house. We were trying to see if we can find him. And it was the worst experience of my life. And, but I'll tell you what I took out of that was the fact that life is just way too short. And you really don't know from day to day. You have to take advantage of every opportunity that you have. So at that point in time, that's when I started my firm. There was some issues with the company that I was working with at the time. The partners weren't getting along and it just wasn't working out. So one of the original partners who left about a year earlier knew this and came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to start our own firm? I think we could do well together." Long story short, his last name is Dolan. So you take Caravela, Dolan, you combine the two and you come up with Carolan. And that's how we came up with the name. Because a lot of people ask me, they're like, is it your wife's name Carolan or your daughter? Like, where does that come from? So no, it's actually the combination of two last names. Now, fast forward 6 months, I bought him out because he really wasn't doing much. Nice guy, but he wasn't doing much. So I bought him out and I went back to my main client at the time. My only client at the time was Bristol Myers Squibb. And I told him, I said, "Look, I'm thinking about changing the name of the company." And she was like, you can't do it. She's like, "Everybody knows you here. You have a really good name. You're doing a great job. And I couldn't even get you back on the vendor list." So it stuck. I just kept it. And here it is 21 years later. That same person at Bristol Myers Squibb called me one day. This is in the very beginning days of, running my business. And she said, "Hey, do you guys recruit for medical science liaisons?" Josh, at the time, I couldn't spell medical science liaison, okay? Let alone know what it was. Without skipping a beat, I was like, yeah, we do. Medical science liaisons. Yeah, we do them all day long. Like literally just like leaned into it, said yes. And that became our niche. Literally, we started doing these. And at one point in time, we were the exclusive field medical affairs MSL search partner for Bristol Myers Squibb. And then we just built this business around it. And here we are 20 years later.
What a great story. Outside of the 9/11 event, which, side note real quick, I don't know if we've talked about this because I know you've told me about your cousin in the past, but 30 years old, lost way too soon.
Yeah.
I was in college at that time. You're a little bit older than me. But so I was in college and obviously that morning was just a mess for all of Americans. And I watched the second plane hit the second building. And then I was supposed to go right to class. And I'm in a history class that morning, of all classes. And the professor decides to carry on with class like nothing happened, and none of us could concentrate. We're all talking like, "Did you hear what happened?" Like, talking about family members, all the different things. But the thing I wanted to bring up was the book I picked up a couple years later was the former CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
And it was, I can't remember the title of the book. I have it up at the house, but it was one of the most fascinating reads I've ever read, strictly because the only people that could have saved that company somehow survived that day through freak circumstance. Like the CFO was out surfing that morning. The CEO was late to drop his daughter off at school that morning, or maybe it was a long time since, probably 20 years since I read this book. But
yeah.
Like only God kept those people alive, because 90% of that company was wiped out at 9/11. Kept those people alive to keep that company going. And then fast forward 15 years, my marketing assistant, when I was at my financial firm, her son went and worked for Cantor Fitzgerald as a bond specialist straight out of college, because that company was able to still exist based on the 10% that still carried it on.
Amazing. That company got decimated. That, like, literally the plane came in, like, literally right where they were. So if you work for Cantor Fitzgerald, the only way you would have survived, from what I understand, is if you didn't show up for work that day.
Yeah.
And ironically, my cousin, so this is just crazy how things like work out. You hear all these stories about these near misses and stuff. And when my cousin went to work that day, that day was so beautiful out. The weather was like the perfect fall, September, crisp, clear blue sky. He decided to take I guess he used to drive to the path and then take the path in, but he walked to the train. I forget what happened, but he didn't take his car. He walked, but he forgot his ID badge. So what happened was, when on that day, anyone that didn't scan in like they normally would were considered on a safe list. So my cousin's name was on a safe list. So now just imagine 9/11 happens. We see that I saw the plane hit the second tower. That was Tower 1, actually. That's where my cousin works. So literally you see the plane come down. I mean, the building come down. We kept seeing scrolling on the TV screen. We're in the New York metropolitan area, and it's like safe list, and his name is on the safe list. So you think he's alive? We think he's alive. So we're calling people, calling hospitals. Why is his name on the safe list? It turns out the reason his name was on the safe list is because he never scanned in that day. And we didn't realize that until later on.
Oh, man, that had to be doubly heartbreaking, thinking that, he was one of the lucky ones. And then, oh, man, sorry to hear that.
Crazy.
All right. So obviously a memorable day for all the wrong reasons for all of us Americans. But all right, let's get us back on track. Recruiting. It's been the bane of so many businesses as of late, because really it's been an employee's market for a number of years.
Yep. And
we're hearing about a lot of hiring issues in the media. Now companies are downsizing, and probably the tides are turning a little bit. But in your opinion, you're very, I say opinion, but it's an expertise. What is the current state of the recruiting industry?
Well, what we're seeing is there's definitely a pullback. So we're seeing companies are tightening, laying people off every day, especially in the pharmaceutical industry. So we specialize obviously in the pharma and biotech space. And I get reports every day, and you see who's laying people off and the impact that the current state of affairs is having on the market. Now, tech has gotten crushed. There's sectors that are just like any other time are doing worse than others. I think what's happening, Josh, is that companies, because of the uncertainty, companies are pulling back and saying, let's lean out. And hopefully by doing this, it'll put us in a situation where we can weather whatever storm might be coming up. Now, what happens though is there's a lot of talent out there. Yep. So now it becomes tempting for companies that are thriving right now. They get their picks. So it has this paradigm shift from what you said was at one point in time, it was a candidate-driven market. Now it's an employer-driven market. So now that affects salaries and compensation. It really has an interesting effect on the way hiring is done. The second shift that you're going to see is that sometimes people overcorrect, companies overcorrect.
Yep.
So you're probably going to wind up seeing a lot of contractors coming back into organizations to fill in the gaps. So that's probably what I see happening next.
Yeah. So companies are going to get lean and mean.
Yep.
And that's in a purposeful effort to, which means any fluff, any of you, that are just skating by and are seen as just a number on a sheet are going to be cut.
Yep.
So let's talk about that a little bit more, because for both professionals and entrepreneurs, this has major implications. So what is going to make a company want to go after a candidate, and what is going to make a company or a candidate want to go after a specific company?
Yeah. So on the candidate side, let me answer on the candidate side. The one thing that I've been telling people, Josh, I say this like literally every day: don't quit your day job. One of the best pieces of advice I can give you is a lot of people are tempted. What happens is people that are still employed start to get freaked out because they see other people getting laid off around them. And they think, well, you know what? I don't like the culture. I could be next. No matter what happens, unless you absolutely have to, keep your day job until if you really want to leave and find something else, try not to leave until you secure a different position. Mm-hmm. When you are unemployed, you automatically become less marketable. You just do. And you don't know how long you're going to be unemployed for. You can't forecast that, especially in this market. So number one, absolutely don't leave a job until you have a job. But for those candidates that are employed, you have to be proactive to stand out amongst your peers so that you can continue to develop and build your career, build your resume. This is not a time to pull back. This is not a time to take it easy. You need to raise your hand. You need to be your own advocate. You need to add to your resume and make sure that you're the one that's getting the high performance, that's getting the best, bonus payouts. This is the time where you need to shine. You have to make sure that you don't go into that bottom or middle third, because you're going to be the next one that's going to get cut. Now, when it comes to on the employer side, because of the fact that, like, what happens if you're an organization and you're a sound organization, but you made a fiscal decision to maybe cut back a little bit? Well, how do you maintain your attraction to the candidate pool that's out there for any positions that maybe you need to backfill, or if there's any hiring in departments that you need to fill? Well, what you have to do is, and I know you and I have had this conversation, but you really, really have to make sure that your culture speaks as loud as possible.
Yes.
It's so important to make sure that you're keeping everyone happy in your organization, because the people that are going to be doing the interviewing are the ones that are going to demonstrate and display your culture. So if you're able to share culture and core values to potential job seekers and candidates that are interviewing with your company, those are the companies where people are going to want to jump to, not the companies where the hiring manager's like, oh, all right, well, tell me about yourself. What can you tell? Right? You see what I'm saying?
Yep. No, that's so good, because culture drives everything. And you're going to get your best employees, and you're going to keep your best employees with a great culture. So this really means the soft skills. This really means taking the time to get to know your employees. And for managers, same thing. Like, if you want to keep your A players, you really have to be in tune with what's going on in their world. And I love what you said earlier about don't quit your day job. So I think there's a misnomer, misquote that comes out there called, and I'll just say the quote, and you know exactly what I'm saying: burn the ships.
Yeah.
At some point as an entrepreneur, you do have to do that. But we have a mutual friend in Tony Watley that he's been on our podcast before, and he wrote a book, Side Hustle Millionaire, because he built a side hustle that made him a millionaire. And he teaches in that book how to do so. So at some point you will have to burn your ships. But I love Tom's advice there, especially in a market like this, is you can build something in the evening. You can build something in the morning. You can build something on the weekends. And until that can replace your current, job income, that's when you burn the ships. Not until then. And especially in a market that's more slanted towards the employers than the candidates. So I think that is of advice that is appropriate at times, because you do have to burn the ships and go all in on yourself at some point. But you also have to know what the economy's doing, what the market's doing, what your marketability is in case that thing doesn't work out. Because if you go on to fail as an entrepreneur, which many business owners do, now what are you going to do? And if you've been out of it for 3 years, how marketable are you back to the employment market, depending on what type of economy we're in?
Absolutely. No. And, you said that, I love the words all in, because as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, you need to double down. So you say all in, I say double down. This is the time where you have to do extra. If you are, let's just say you want to hedge your bet on a side hustle. That's great, but you're literally doubling down. It's nights, weekends. This is not a time to take it easy. There's way too many people taking it easy right now. This is a time for you to build. While everybody else is taking it easy, you build. Yes.
When it's just following Warren Buffett's advice. When everyone is going in, he pulls back. When everyone's going out, he looks for opportunities to buy. It's that sage advice from people that have done it like a master class. That's who you follow. Don't follow your own comfortability or some of these, TV hosts that don't know shit about jobs, markets, or any of that nature. So follow experts like Tom, follow experts like Warren Buffett that really know what they're doing. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of all of our listeners for some masterful recruiting wisdom. And I want to transition, because this is the more fun stuff for you and I in our conversations on mindset and as it relates to recruiting and professional growth and development. So what's going on with all the negativity that we're seeing in the marketplace, in your personal opinion?
I'll tell you, I think what's going on is that we live in this culture that everything is so public because of social media. So when there's a tone that exists in the masses, it travels faster now. Mm-hmm. Back in the day when we were younger, the tone would come out, that narrative would come out through TV more than really anything else, and through parents and whatever. In this day and age, any tone that winds up, any narrative that exists in the masses winds up, it takes off like wildfire. So I could tell you that it drives me crazy to see people adopt something that's not going to benefit them, not just in the long term, but just even in the immediate. It's going to just bring you down into where the masses are. So Josh, I'm going to steal what you just said. I'm taking the total opposite approach of everybody else. I'm turning the news off. I don't watch it. I don't subscribe to it. As a matter of fact, I'm excited every day. I'm excited because there's so much opportunity. There is so much land to be grabbed right now because there's so many people pulling back. I just think that there's a false narrative. Yeah, there are things there's obviously issues. I'm not like, listen, go to the supermarket and buy a couple of things and you realize how expensive everything is. Go and get gas. You realize how expensive it is. I get it. I mean, I'm not living under a rock, but that doesn't mean that you have to subscribe to it, that you have to give into it.
Yep. 100% agree. And as you were talking, I was thinking about another pressure that we're facing is the evolution of AI. And I think that there's an opportunity for people like you and people like me and other jobs that cannot be replaced by robots or artificial intelligence. So it's one of those, like that human connection where people are always going to value having a human's touch or a human's opinion or a human's expertise. Those are the things that you need to develop in that skill set, because it's fascinating to me to think about the people that are creating the AI are literally creating something that's going to replace their own job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating?
It's fascinating.
Like, why would you continue to? I mean, the grandfather of AI just stopped.
Yeah.
He just and regrets now his life's work. And now we have young people in their 20s out at Google's campus and others that are doubling down on this, and they're literally creating something that's going to replace their work.
Yeah. It's scary, man. It really is scary. And I'll tell you, I think you said you used the word relationships at one point. No matter how advanced we get, technically speaking, the human interaction and relationships that exist is always going to be paramount to your success in your career.
Yes.
For example, someone is always going to be in a position, someone has to hire you. A machine's not going to hire you. You're not getting hired by a machine. Someone has to manage you. Someone has to be a partner to you, a mentor to you. Someone has to be a coworker to you. Those relationships are what creates careers. That's what needs to be worked on and what needs to be nurtured so that you can get ahead. Now, I am not of the opinion that we should all stick our head in the sand and not have an understanding of what artificial intelligence is, how it works, and how there might be some efficiencies to it. But I don't want to subscribe to the fact that a machine is going to replace a human, nor do I think it should. So I think that be smart about educating yourself on what's out there and how it may make an impact on your career, but go all in on your relationships.
Yeah, that's such good advice. And then on the flip side of that, I completely agree, because you have AI that's going to replace, people that are fry cooks at McDonald's. Well, you've been advocating for $15 an hour wages for a fry cook. That doesn't deserve to a corporation $15 an hour. So they create a robot that can be a fry cook, flip burgers, and get our meals out to us. So it's just a whole interesting dichotomy. But at the end of the day, relationships and human to human connection, because that's what God really endowed us with. One of the things that he endowed us with is to build relationships and be in connection. That's why COVID was such a huge mess for a lot of people mentally, which we won't get into because we don't have time to go down that rabbit hole. But that's the big reason, is we are wired to be connected. So find avenues, whether it's side hustle or your main thing, that relationships are the key. Human to human interaction is the key. Sales, leadership, coaching, recruiting, those types of things. And there's probably a bunch of different ones I don't know, but those are the ones I do know, where you cannot be replaced. That would be my biggest advice. And anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, here's the thing, like, and it doesn't necessarily have to just be service-based industries, although that's where we come from. So that's closest and near and dearest to our heart. But even, it's funny, any job that you do, you mentioned the McDonald's thing. It's funny. I use this analogy when I talk to job seekers and candidates and mentor younger folks. One of the best pieces of advice I can give you is be the best at your job. Whatever your job is, if you're selling Krabby Patties in Bikini Bottom at the Krusty Krab, you need to be you need to make the best Krabby Patties. You want to have a line out the door so that everybody else in Bikini Bottom will only come to the Krusty Krab to get Krabby Patties. They're not going to any other competitors. That's how good you need to be. So when it doesn't matter what job you do, just be the best and stand out for all the right reasons. Show up early, stay late, raise your hand to do extra. Don't stir the pot and make any waves within your team. Get your paperwork in on time. These are all things we can control. So if you can control the controllables and perform, you're going to get ahead. And that's seems like it's such basic advice, but that's what works.
Yes. Well, that really led me into my next question and thought, is because you raise kids that are part of this next generation that a lot of people have a lot of things and opinions to say about. But your one son is serving our country currently in Japan, who went to the Naval Academy, and again, always thanking you and him for his service and honoring our country. But you raised some kids right. So was that part of the advice that you gave them always doing their best. And is there anything else you add to that to make sure that, this next generation, whether it's the 22 to 32 year olds or even beyond that, is like you're keeping yourself focused and your career on track, and how to make sure that you're maximizing every opportunity that's put in front of you?
Yeah. Well, as far as my kids go, and I have to credit my wife, was the disciplinarian in my house. And she was very strict, supportive, but strict. We had very little tolerance for mediocrity in my house. And we're just a family of overachievers, both me and my wife. It wasn't easy being a Caravela kid. I could tell you that. They didn't have it. They just didn't have it the same way that everybody else did, in the sense that both were very competitive athletes that picked one sport and were all in on that one sport. My daughter actually was offered a full athletic scholarship for gymnastics as a freshman in high school. Freshman in high school. And then my son was, like, as you know, was recruited by the Naval Academy. And my daughter later went on to UPenn. She could have gone to a number of different schools. She decided not to go to Ohio State because she wanted to get a better education. And my son—
You hear that, Ohio State fans? I just want to make sure the Ohio State fans heard that she wanted to get a better education somewhere else. Because the Ohio State fans I know, being in the Big Ten here, they're quite arrogant. Well, so I just want to make sure they heard your statement there.
Yeah. And no knock on Ohio State or the Buckeyes. I'm a Rutgers guy, so I'm a Big Ten guy too. But here's my point. My point is, my kid didn't have to go to the Naval Academy. My daughter didn't have to go to UPenn. There was an easier route for both of them. They really could have gone anywhere. They took the harder route. And it was a harder life, and both of them went through a lot. But the discipline, the drive, the not settling for mediocrity, the becoming really incredibly goal-oriented, developing overachievers have brought them to a whole nother level. And I credit my wife for it. So there's a couple in any walk of life, there's paths that you could take.
Yes.
And some people take the road less traveled, and it makes all the difference.
Yep.
I asked my son, why did you do it? Why'd you go in the military? You didn't have to go in the military. He's going to come work with me. He's going to be literally right next to me. God willing. I can't wait for it. I really want him to come and work with me one day. So knowing that, he didn't have to serve. He didn't have to go into the military. His answer was, you know what, Dad? I just wanted to do something that very few people can say they've done. I don't know if that comes from me, if it comes from my wife. I'm not sure where it comes from, but I could tell you it's already paid off and will continue to pay off for him. And I think
for sure,
we need more of that.
We do need more of that. And in fact, anytime I hear someone bash on this next generation, which is your son's age, your daughter's age, I always say it's not their fault. It's their parents' fault. So the fact that you and your wife did raise them right has propelled them for success. And like you said, it wasn't easy. Well, nothing worth it ever is, guys. Nothing worth it ever is easy. Okay, so get that through your heads, this participation trophy thing, all the different things. Like my girls, as you know, are heavy into dance. I'm like, whether they got first place, 10th place, whatever, because in dance they get medals up to 5th place. I don't know, maybe whatever. I'm still trying to understand it all because I did not grow up dancing. So my wife is explaining to me this stuff. Anyhow, the point being is, did you do your best? That's why I end each of these episodes with the quote, "Good and great are the enemies of possible." I had someone ask me about this the other day. Said, "What does that mean to me?" I said, "Well, how often have you been told you've done a good job?" Decent amount. Yeah. But was it your best? How often have you been told that you did great? But was it your best? Like, did you have more to give even of it? Like, even if you got first place, but you did, and you had a little bit more to give, and you knew that in your head, that still wasn't what's possible. I want what's possible. I want that, like, Arate stands for excellence. Like, I love watching Katie Ledecky in the Olympics. I don't see much swimming in between the 4 years of the Olympics, but literally the top 10 world records in her sport are hers.
Yeah.
She just continuously PRs, and no one's even close to her. And she just is driven to beat her previous best self, essentially. So I love people like that are continuously pushing the bar, pushing the envelope, looking for excellence. And so that's the advice that I think that you're giving out as well, is like how you raise your kids. And that's what I just say for the parents or the people that are bashing this next generation is the school systems are not for them. The participation trophies and the sports programs and the parents that are just, out there preaching kind of mediocrity. However, it still begins and ends in the home. And just want to applaud you and your wife for doing such a great job with your kids.
Thanks, brother. I mean, I appreciate it. It wasn't easy.
No.
It wasn't easy, but I do appreciate that. And that, again, not to get too far into it, but this is, sometimes you have to consider doing the opposite of what everybody else is doing. I think that there's this cultural shift towards, be friends with your kids, your kids should be your best friends. And, well, they're only kids, let them do this or let them do that, and that's where a lot of problems happen.
Yeah. Well, and you see where that's led to. We have skyrocketing suicide and suicide attempts in teenagers.
Yep.
Right. And that's, a big part of that social media, but it's cultural. It's all cultural. So we have to be very protective of our kids. So it's great advice. So let's talk about leaders. So we talked a little bit about what professionals or candidates can do and how they can set themselves apart and continually be their best in whatever they're doing, because that's going to lead to the next thing and be more attractive to leaders. But what do leaders need to be doing more of?
Well, I think that, again, especially in this day and age, I think leaders need to be authentic. Leaders need to, there's so much noise and there's so much copycatting, for lack of a better word. Like, again, I hate to go back to the social media thing, but I kind of feel like you start to see the same thing over and over. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be authentic. It's okay to maybe do things and say things a little differently. You don't have to just play it safe all the time and be like everyone else. I think that what leaders really need to do more in this time more than ever is just put yourself in the other person's shoes. You have to pour into other people, develop other people. You have to let them know, I see you, I want the best for you. And that might mean you have to have some hard conversations with certain people. Mm-hmm. And you have to be direct. And it might not all be the participation trophy stuff that we were talking about. It might be, hey, listen, I just need you to know right now you're on the bottom. And you have the ability to get to the top, but you're just not doing it. Whatever the conversation might be. But the idea is that you put yourself, your authentic self, in front of your team and everybody that's out there so that they can see, wow, that person's the real deal. They carry themselves the right way. They're unapologetic. This is who they are. And they care about others and they're willing to put themselves out, have difficult conversations, and bring people to a whole nother level. So I don't know if I combined a couple things there, but that's what I'm seeing.
No, I think it's spot on. The vulnerability piece, obviously, there's a dichotomy there, and I've talked about this on previous episodes where you can be too vulnerable as a leader too. So you need to know where that line is. But authenticity, that you need to be 100% in. I think being 100% vulnerable at times can leave you open. And potentially could hurt you as far as like, on the finances side, if you're too vulnerable on your finances as a business owner and it makes your employees insecure about where you're at and if they're going to have a job next week or get paid next week, right? So that can breed some uncertainty. So vulnerability, there is a fine line to walk. Authenticity, I would agree with you, go 100% towards that. Like there's no harm going to be done being 100% yourself, because you're going to attract to you who is meant to be in your tribe and repel those that aren't. So if you actually, that would be a piece of advice I'd give. Like if you're like, yeah, Tom, Josh, I agree with you. I haven't been 100% authentic. I've held back. Step one would be lean into it and just know that you may lose a couple employees in that, but they weren't meant to be in your tribe, and who you're going to attract is going to be 100 times better.
Oh yeah. And getting back to the vulnerability piece, it's as simple as one thing. Just be able to admit a mistake.
Oh,
and
yes.
I think that that's the big thing for me, is that a lot of times I think leaders tend to think that, well, I have to make everybody think I have all the answers, and that I'm not vulnerable, and that I'm not exposed, and I'm not.
Such a good point.
And it really, I think people are going to be more attracted to you. Being an authentic person means that you can admit your mistakes, because you're putting yourself out and saying, hey, I'm sharing this with you because I know, because I've made that mistake before, or I've seen it before, or I learned from this, whatever it might be. And that's how you really help people, because you're going to make a connection with them where they're going to say, wow, Tom really opened up to me, and he showed his a weakness, or he showed his softer side. And, I can relate to that. And we now, like, you get on the same page with people.
You know what it just made me think of? I may have given this example before, but it's what you just made me think of is so good. My first year of marriage. So I'll be blessed to be married 15 years in about a month.
Nice.
And my first year of marriage, I'm sitting on my not my back patio, my parents' back patio. My dad's grilling. We're having a cigar. And Jenna and I were bickering about something totally trivial, like totally meaningless, right? First year of marriage, as for a lot of people, is pretty tough. And for us, probably no different. It was probably our toughest year, but anyhow, we're bickering about something totally trivial. And my dad just puts his hand on my arm and very quietly and calmly says, Josh, pick your battles. And the reason I could take that to heart in then is because I watched that man F up so many times with my mom.
Yeah.
And so even him being authentically him, and even in that moment, knowing that he's messed up so many times with my mom, and me being the oldest, saw so many of those times, I was able to take his advice authentically and vulnerably because I'd seen him mess up, and also it was sage advice in that moment because it was, again, a meaningless bickering, meaningless argument. So it just made me think about that.
I love it. Well, tomorrow is my anniversary. So
hey, congrats.
Very timely.
What number?
27 years.
Congrats to you two. 27 years. Amazing.
Yeah.
You don't hear many getting past 10. I mean, the divorce rate continues to climb, people not taking it seriously. By the way, marriage is hard work.
It is hard work. It is hard work. And it's so funny. I'm not making this up, Josh. So I talked to my son this morning, and I don't get to talk to him. He's in Japan. I talk to him maybe once every 2 months. And I just happened to talk to him this morning, and we had this conversation. And I literally said, you know what? You need to pick your battles. Because we were having a conversation.
Because he's recently married, but he can't see her all the time either, right? Is that correct?
Well, no, she's out. Well, she's with him. So she's out there with him. They live together in Japan.
Okay.
But his job, like when you're in the military, you're owned. Like you literally, your time is not your own. You have to be certain places at certain times, and there's no compromise at all. But I literally had this conversation with him. I got up early this morning. I woke up way earlier than I normally do. With the time difference, I said, this would be a perfect time. So I tried him, and he picked up. And we were catching up, and we were talking about this exact topic. And the two things we talked about is that a successful marriage is about compromise, and it's knowing what battles to pick and when to keep your mouth shut. So it's amazing. We literally just had it this morning.
It's great sage advice. And I take that and tell you guys from watching my dad who is not a perfect man, definitely not a perfect husband, much like any of us, right? But I watched him screw up so many times and then give me that sage advice in my first year of marriage, and clearly I've never forgotten it. Not to say that I haven't messed up in my last 14 years and probably started some battles I didn't need to, but I've never forgotten that advice and never will. So I want to, as we close up, a couple questions, but you're one of the best guys I know on mindset. Tom, you guys can't see this on camera probably, but over 50 years old, still in incredible shape, used to be a hell of a wrestler in his day, and his son as well at the Naval Academy. But so mindset is a big thing. It's been one of the most crucial things for me going through the trials and tribulations that I've gone through. Well, to be successful, and then all the trials and tribulations that come along with it. What has been maybe just one, or I always want to leave the audience with, practical takeaways. One or two things on mindset that has helped you become as successful as you have become and continue to live a life, A, in faith, B, with God, C, in fitness, like doing all the things right, and then obviously being highly successful in your career.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I'll give you one, and I'll give you a story to go along with it. So the one thing that has helped me tremendously with my mindset and being able to really make a huge impact on the productivity and just making my life better is to not try to hit the 5-run home run, not getting up to the plate, trying to hit the 5-run home run. I'll give you a story. So I don't know if you ever heard the story of Charles Barkley when he first came up into the league. But his mentor was Moses Malone, who was much older than him, and took him under his wing. And Charles said, "Hey, what do I need to be successful at this level?" So Moses said, "Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to lose 10 pounds. So I want you to go eat clean, get extra workouts, and come back to me after you lose 10 pounds." So Charles did it, comes back. He's like, "All right, I lost the 10 pounds." He's like, "That's great. I'm really proud of you." He's like, "Well, what do I do next?" He goes, "I need you to lose another 10 pounds. So Charles goes, he follows the same formula and eats clean, loses the 10 pounds, comes back. So Moses says to him 4 more times, "I need you to lose 10 pounds. Charles Barkley lost 60 pounds because Moses Malone told him that's what he needed to do to be successful. So the last time that he went back to him, he said, "Well, Moses, why didn't you just tell me to lose 60 pounds? And he said, "Because if I told you needed to lose 60 pounds, you would have never done it." So what I mean by not trying to hit the 5-run home run and not trying to lose 60 pounds all at once is that you really have to look at life in smaller increments and develop habits that are going to get you to your goals. You have to be goal-oriented. You have to have goals. You have to have values, and you have to know what you're aiming towards. But don't expect to do it in one day. Break it off into bite-sized chunks and work at it every day. So the reason I'm 55 years old and I'm in the best shape of my life is because every single day I work at it. The reason why my business is successful is because every day I have a process. The reason I've remained faithful and spiritual is because I focus on it every single day. The reason my marriage is successful is because I do pour into my marriage. Anything that's important to you, whatever your values are, whatever your goals are, I would write them down, have it like really be a visual person, have it in front of you, and then develop a plan each day of how you're going to chip away to get there.
Well, I think we could drop the mic right there. But I do have one more question as we end the show, because I've been ending the show with each of these questions. That was such good advice. People need to go and replay that a couple times for themselves, because it is true. Break it down daily and execute on that breakdown. And my only other rule, and I gave this to someone at the gym the other night that was just getting started. Actually, it was last night. Never miss twice. Right? So if you do screw up, we all have those days. If you are sick, if you do happen to just have a bad moment in a day or a bad day in general, don't let it spiral.
Great advice, man.
Don't miss twice.
Consistency.
So, stick with it. Don't let it become a habit, because it can spiral the other way as well. So, My ending question that I've been getting people's opinion on, what's an unpopular belief that you hold to be true that most others would disagree with?
Unpopular belief that I believe to be true that most others don't.
What hill would you die on, Tom?
Well, listen, I'm old school. So being an old school guy, I'm a faithful person, and I believe that I can be a follower of Jesus Christ and talk about it and not be ashamed of it. And I know a lot of people don't believe that. They feel like they have to hide it. I don't throw my religion in people's faces. I'm not one of these I don't like to overdo it, like someone who's overbearing that's going to make anyone else feel uncomfortable, but I'm also not going to be ashamed of it. So it's something that I'm really proud of. And I've raised my family this way. It's made all the difference in my life. So I'm not ashamed to bring it up and talk about it. And I'm not ashamed to be old school. I don't want to have to subscribe to every modern norm that exists out there. I don't want to have to do it. And that's part of being authentic. And that's part of being real and understanding that I have an obligation to myself to fulfill the life that God put in front of me. And I'm not going to apologize for it.
Yes. That is amazing, because that is what our founders of this country wanted. To be able to believe what we believe as individuals and have that right and be able to speak our mind to it. And again, it's not to throw in anyone else's face, but it's been interesting to watch this cultural war and kind of the degradation of American values. But the fact of the matter is that if you want to believe in Jesus Christ, or if someone else wants to believe in Buddha, or someone else wants to believe in some sort of alien mothership, that's their right. So the fact that Jesus gets brought up and now some person cringes, like, that's not your business. You're allowed to believe what you want to believe. So I love that. I love our conversations as always. I know you got to get running here, and I want to make sure that we value your time. But if people want to follow you, connect with you, or search your firm out potentially because they are in that niche and they happen to be listening today, how can they do that?
LinkedIn is the best place to find me. I'm all over LinkedIn, and I that's kind of my main source of communication outside of email. So just go to LinkedIn. It's Tom. My last name is Caravela with one L. A lot of people spell it with two L's. So it's Caravela. Check it out. I do have a podcast as well. My podcast is very, very specific to the medical affairs community in pharma. But I will say, you got to listen to my episode with Josh, because Josh was on and it was amazing. So
I appreciate it.
Check that out.
It was a lot of fun, and this was a lot of fun because, and I get to see you in a couple of weeks, so I'm excited about that. And we can smoke a cigar together instead of just me smoking one here without you, because my podcast studio allows that and your office does not. Excuse me. But really looking forward to that. Thank you for spending the time and pouring into my audience today. It was a great, great show. Everyone, remember to share this all over the place, because Tom just gave great recruiting advice, great mindset advice, great life advice, and how to raise a family as well. So Spartans, remember, good and great are the enemies of possible. Lead like a Spartan today.